averageStar Reads presents Solemn Trepidation by Light Derived from Darkness. Chapter 2, The Darkest Past. Part 1. Laurel half expected to wake up and find herself staring down at the dismal gray surface of the desk, but instead found herself squinting her eyes under a set of harsh emergency fluorescent lights overhead. She almost immediately shot up and about near toppled off whatever she was lying down on, and probably would have if someone hadn't firmly planted their hand against her chest to keep her from falling.
Whoa, calm down. It's okay. Freddy and those guys got you away from him.
Laurel felt an odd shudder travel down her form as she glimpsed to the side, still disoriented, and saw Toy Chica smiling faintly at her. It seemed to be a bit more genuine than when she was simply interacting with the guests. Though her voice sounded the same, that distinct mixture of both a generated human voice with a mechanized undertone. Laurel managed to get her breath under control. Though doing so, she realized just how much her throat was killing her now. She had to imagine that after that thing's stranglehold on her, she would have a mighty bruise forming on her neck right about now. Still, even knowing that there was some distance between her and it didn't change the fact that now, apparently, the other animatronics had also come to life and were interacting with her. That didn't exactly settle her down much, in spite of being relieved to have been rescued. Even now, she was choking a bit, trying to come up with a response, even though Toy Chica didn't seem at all dangerous at the moment. Eventually, she managed to form a few words that were half-strung together. "You're all alive? Or self-aware? Or something?" she managed to sputter after a moment. Toy Chica looked a bit baffled, but then nodded a bit. At least the animatronic's solemn expression put her more at ease. She couldn't sense any sort of malice from her.
Not alive, but self-aware. Yeah, most of us have been for a long time now,
she replied calmly.
That's why we usually were looking at the cameras when you were working the last couple nights. We're usually kinda leery about new security officers.
Inwardly, Laurel was starting to realize why it was so damn hard for this place to keep a night watchman when this kind of craziness probably had been occurring for decades now. But at the same time, she almost felt mystified that it was happening at all. Her manager had said that even the oldest of the animatronics had been ahead of their time when it came to their technological capabilities, but this went beyond what she considered them capable of. "Well, that does explain a few things, I guess," Laurel murmured. There was a ratty infirmary blanket wrapped around her that she pulled a bit tighter to herself, out of instinct. "Well, at least I'm out of whatever that thing was. Who was it? Anyways." Toy Chica's expression darkened a bit, her gaze somewhat lowered.
He calls himself Springtrap. He and Golden Freddy are the two oldest animatronics that were originally commissioned by this company years ago to be used in their restaurants. But both of them are tainted in different ways.
Tainted? Laurel felt her stomach sink a bit at Chico's drop in tone.
It's a really long story. Trust me on that for now. It'd be better for us to tell you all together, because, well, it's a lot of stories that all sort of came together in a really dark way over a lot of years. Let's worry about getting you feeling better first, though.
Toy Chica paused and stood, moving to the first aid station. Laurel finally realized she was in the actual infirmary, though calling that seemed like an overestimation. The first aid station was little more than a half-converted storage closet that had an old twin-sized mattress on a trundle and a cabinet with bandages and ice packs. Toy Chica reached into it and took out one of the latter. She pressed into it with ease and popped the small sack that released the cooling agent, then wrapped it in a paper towel before handing it to Laurel. She murmured a small but genuine thanks before she took it and pressed it to her throbbing neck. "I owe you guys, one way or another, for getting me out of there. As weird as all of this is, I don't even want to think about what he might have done if they hadn't."
Let's worry about that later.
Toy Chica's voice faltered a bit. Laurel could tell she was trying to be encouraging, but there was a rather dismal air hanging over them.
Try not to be nervous for the time being, though. We'll do our best to keep you safe from him.
Laurel blinked and looked at her a bit questioningly. "I thought you said you guys were leery about security officers. If that's true, then why are you guys trying to help me? I mean, I can only assume you guys have sort of terrorize the last set of security officers out of here pretty routinely if they're willing to hire a college freshman with zero experience. Toy Chica smiled a little sheepishly, ruffling the small faux feathers on the back of her head.
In all honesty, it's actually because you're a girl.
Laurel looked a bit confused. Because I'm a girl? I mean, I know some guys are jerks, but so are some girls.
It kind of ties into everything else. Listen, I promise once the others come back, we'll get everything figured out and try to get everything explained to you as best we can, all right?
Toy Chica replied, resting a hand on Laurel's shoulder. Laurel sighed a bit, but nodded. It was hard not to want answers right this moment, though. But she sat there, icing her wound quietly for a few more moments, before the two of them could hear the sounds of others approaching them. At first, Laurel was nervous, since she had no idea what had happened after Foxy had snagged her, but it was some of the others returning. Freddie emerged into the infirmary first, pushing the door open as Foxy helped Vixen inside. The female animatronic looked somewhat damaged, a large claw mark across her left optic that had driven her artificial eye inwards. Foxy helped her to slump down against the wall and seemed to be rummaging, looking for a repair kit.
That bastard's always up to no good. He's a nasty bilge rat, that's for certain.
Foxy muttered angrily, managing to locate a screwdriver amongst some of the miscellaneous tools left over from the room's days as a closet.
Let's just feel fortunate he didn't manage to do more damage than he did,
Freddie replied, though his deeper voice sounded slightly troubled in spite of his words. He had suffered what looked like some minimal damage himself, though he made no move to fix anything right away.
At least we managed to get her away from him.
Vixen paused and sputtered a bit. It seemed like her vocalization box was still malfunctioning badly. Her voice normally was pretty soft and melodic, but when it malfunctioned, it sounded like screeching feedback from an old AM radio.
Just take it easy, lass. Foxy will get you patched up,
Foxy said, carefully using the screwdriver to pop her optic back into place where it had been gouged out of calibration.
Yar, we'll have to abscond some thread and needle to make some repairs to ye.
I'm sorry you guys got hurt, coming to help me, Laurel said a bit sheepishly. It felt a bit odd to feel guilted that what she'd perceived as inanimate and lifeless animatronics had been hurt for her sake, but it was happening nonetheless.
It's not your fault,
Vixen said, wincing a bit when Foxy readjusted her optic back into place, though she blinked slowly and smiled.
That's much better. Thanks. We really need to look into getting your vocal box repaired sometime,
Freddie said as he knelt down, observing as Foxy repaired what he was able to of her injuries.
The technicians have tried. It's just never worked correctly ever since my stint in Kid Cove.
Vixen sighed, her eyes sagging a bit.
Don't worry, lass. We all make do with it.
Foxy smirked a bit, tapping her cheek a bit with his hook to comfort her. It seemed to work, since she smiled a little warmly. Laurel just watched their interactions with silent fascination. This seemed to go beyond just being self-aware. They each had their own distinctive personalities. Management had never mentioned anything about this before. Could it be they were really unaware of it themselves? Also, that meant that each of these characters had to essentially operate as automatons during the day, when patrons were present. She couldn't even fathom how mind-numbing that would be for beings that had this level of thought and personality. It was almost hard to take in. She honestly didn't know, though, why she was so calm. You'd think that after having come to realize that the animatronics that she had been left to guard were actually, for all intents and purposes, thinking and self-sustaining beings, that would freak her out just a little bit. But in all truth, something about it seemed to make a lot of sense. This really seemed to explain to her how this chain had undergone so many disastrous events over the years, if, like Toy Chica had told her, they had been self-aware and conscious now for decades. Of course, for every question it did answer, it opened other cans of worms. How exactly did all of this happen in the first place? How did they obtain so much personality and intelligence? She was shaken from her thoughts when she realized that someone had plopped down beside her on the old infirmary bed. The old trundle cringed a bit with strain as Foxy sat down beside her and took a moment to observe the bruising on her neck.
Yar, that bastard's got you good, didn't
he said, looking a bit worried for her. Laurel shook her head a bit. I'm okay. It's just some bruises. He would have done a lot worse if it weren't for you guys, she said, mustering a weak smile. Foxy returned it almost instantly.
It were nothing less. In all truth, when we heard that there be a female watchman in the crow's nest, we were nervous that something might happen to ye because of that vermin. None of us wanted him aft here again, but this damn company keeps making these same mistakes over and over again.
Laurel nodded. Toy Chica told me that his name is Springtrap. My manager, he told me he was one of the original animatronics from all the way back in the 70s, at the old family diner that started this chain.
He's right. He's one of the oldest animatronics, but he's also one of the most dangerous,
Freddie said, a bit ominously, as Ian helped Vixen stand up. She seemed to be doing better now, though she leaned on him for support. I don't understand, though. All of you seem, well, pretty darn nice and friendly, in spite of the rumors about this place that have been around for ages now. Why's he such a prick? Laurel asked. She felt weird making light of it, but she was trying to lighten the mood a bit. There was an uneasy silence in the air for a moment, almost suffocatingly so. Eventually, Freddie spoke after a somewhat drawn-out sigh.
The truth is, it all goes back a long ways to when the first restaurant opened. It's a really long and sordid history. I'm sure you know that by now.
Hey, I am trapped here for the time being. You can explain it to me if you want to, but I do understand if it's hard to talk about. I can really only assume that given how all of you are acting, that some of those rumors that have been around for a long time now are true.
The rumors only scratch the surface, really, of what happened here.
Toy Chica said.
If you're talking about there being murders, then yeah, those are all true. But what happened after the first ones until now is what caused all this to be what it is.
I'm listening, Laurel replied. She actually felt nervous to hear it all for herself, but it was unlikely she'd really fully understand the gravity of all this, and how these animatronics and their personalities had come to be, unless she knew the backstory behind it. Freddie sat down, but seemed prepared to explain it, even though it seemed painful for them to do so. To be continued. That was Solemn Trepidation by Light Derived from Darkness. Chapter 2, The Darkest Past, Part 1. Join us next time for Part 2 of Chapter 2. And from me, AverageStar, I thank you.